check that the live stream has started? Thank you. I will go to each committee member to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for me to do so. So if you could verbally confirm that you're able to hear me, and I will confirm in response that I can hear you. Councillor Graham Andrews.
I can confirm I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Councillor Kath Hay.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Diana Toynbee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I can see you and hear you. Thanks.
And moving on to our education co-optees, Mr. Pratley.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. I'd also like to request that members and officers in attendance also confirm that they can see, hear and be heard when I call them to speak. Members in attendance today are Councillor Norman, Cabinet Member for Children and Families. There are a number of officers in attendance today. I also like to welcome Jane Ellis. Jane would like to give us a wave or a speak.
Hi, I can hear you.
Right. Jane is the director of Health Watch, and she has recently been appointed as lead for children and young people. She hopes to attend all of our children's scrutiny meetings as an observer. Okay. I was going to welcome, but she's not here yet, Kath Knowles, who is our new interim Director of Children and Families.
Chair, she did join us and then dropped out, so apologies. I suspect she's having tech difficulties.
Right. I'll welcome her when she comes back in then. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting today. The council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting. Please note that this is a legal requirement that every member attending virtual meetings is able to hear and, where practicable, see and be heard, and where practicable, be seen by the other members in attendance and the public watching. So that I ask that you please have your audio switched on and also have your video enabled where possible. For virtual meetings, there are some additional points for members of the committee and officers to be aware of. As part of our meeting etiquette and in line with our normal committee practices, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start and during the meeting. When you wish to speak, please use the raised hand button under the reactions icon or against your name in the participants list. I will then invite you to speak in order of the hands being raised. Electronic voting will be used at this meeting. You will be asked to use the electronic polls to vote to confirm the minutes and agree recommendations. When the poll appears on the screen, please select an option and press submit. If the poll does not appear on the screen, please access the poll icon at the foot of your screen in Zoom. If you are unable to vote, please raise your virtual hand. An electronic log of voting choices selected by committee members will be kept. If the vote is unanimous, it will be recorded as such in the minutes. If the vote is not unanimous, a record of the voting choices of each committee member will be published as an appendix to the formal minutes of the meeting. Okay. Do we have any apologies for absence, Matt?
Yes, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Paul Andrews, Councillor Mike Jones and Mr. Andy James.
Thank you. Do we have any name substitutes?
No substitutes.
Before I move on to declarations of interest, I'd just like to make a short statement. We're here today to consider the work programme, recommendations tracker and the scoping document for the task and finish group on therapies. Before we move to these items, I feel it would be remiss of me not to comment on Tuesday's full council meeting, which was to consider recommendations following a High Court judgment. The Council, and in particular the Children and Families Directorate, have a huge task in front of them, and we are ready to play our part. I will be seeking during the meeting the advice from officers and listening to committee members with regards to scrutiny's role in the improvement strategy. Thank you. Now move on to declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest under Schedule 1, Schedule 2, or other interests in any of today's agenda items? Could you please, if you have, could you please do this by raising your virtual hand, and I will then ask you to speak to notify the meeting which item you have an interest in and the nature of your interest. No? Okay. We then move on to item 4, which is to approve and agree the minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of March. The minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March are included in the agenda on pages 1 to 12 for approval. Oh, I welcome Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My apologies. I was all set up, ready to go, and it did a reboot and it wouldn't let me snooze it. So,
okay, that's fine. Thank you. But you can obviously hear and see me, and I can hear and see you.
I can hear and see you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the minutes, no matters of accuracy have been notified to the Monitoring Officer, so I will ask committee members to confirm that they agree the minutes by an electronic vote. There will be a vote on every set of minutes. Non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room for a few moments. They will then be returned to the meeting room when all eligible votes have been cast. Please can non-voting attendees now be moved out of the meeting room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
Okay, Chair, the voting number is 6 and the poll should be on members' screens now.
Okay, thank you.
And the minutes have been approved unanimously, Chair.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you very much. We please bring the non-voting attendees now back into the meeting. Okay, is Kath Knowles actually with us, or is she still having problems?
She is with us, Chair, but she's having problems with the audio, so we were still trying to get her into the meeting properly. If you could bear with us, sorry.
I will do. I can go to the next two items and we'll we'll then wait for her. Right, item 5 is questions from members of the public. Matt, do we have any questions from members of the public?
None received, Chair.
Item 6 is questions from members of the council. Matt, do we have any questions from the council?
Again, none received.
Item 7 is the work programme. The committee is asked to review the work programme for 2021 as attached with the agenda. So if we could go to that item. I would like for Catherine to be in the meeting. We're still struggling.
At the moment, yes, sorry, Chair.
Right. I'll start the item then. There's a couple of things I just want to say in advance of comments from members and officers. The work programme is before you. We intend to add to the meeting of the 1st of June a review of all the peer-on-peer recommendations. They are the recommendations that were proposed by scrutiny, plus I believe the 3 recommendations that came from Cabinet. And we intend to review all of those to check on the progress as it is now, you know, a good few months since we made those recommendations. My understanding also is that in discussions with Kate Charlton, we've had some talk around following the full council meeting on Tuesday, but I think it would have been a good idea anyway for legal services to provide a presentation briefing for members to consider, scrutinise, challenge, etc., around the work of the children's legal services with regards to what's been going on in the last 12 months. So, Kate, if you'd like to comment on how you see this going forward.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Ganty. First of all, apologies from joining. I got to continue a blue circle. So, yes, good afternoon, members. Yes, what I'm proposing is that we bring a report to a special scrutiny meeting, and that's subject to Councillor Gandy. And that report will be how an in-house legal services within the children's service works, and how also we've worked with the service over the last 12 months and how we want to work with the service going forward. There have been significant changes in terms of how this children's service has worked since the issues raised in the report of 2000 the judgment and the report that went to council last week. I joined the council in November 2019, wasn't part of the decision making that took place in June 2019, but I became aware very quickly that we needed to make some improvements in the way that we work. And now with Kath Knowles joining us, we've got an open door, and so further improvements have been made very quickly since Kath has joined, and we then have got recommendations going forward. And then what I'd like to do after that is also bring a report later on in the year in terms of how we're meeting what we're saying we're doing, so actually evidencing how we're meeting, and having Kath and Andy with us as well to say, yes, that's what we're doing, that's how we're working jointly together. So it's 2 stages really, to come and talk to you about what we've done in the last 12 months, what we'd like to do going forward, what we're proposing to do going forward, and how an in-house legal service works within an organisation and a public sector organisation.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, just to reinforce the joint working really, because I've got overall responsibility, I guess, around some of the independent assurance work that we're doing coming out of the judgment. And you know, one of the positive things I think that's come out of that is the fact that I think a couple of people from legal services will be seconded in to work with that team, as well as working alongside staff, particularly in relation to some specific areas of work around special guardianship orders. So that's a good, welcomed development, I think, going forward. So just to sort of commend what Kate was saying.
Thank you. Diana.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Kate and Andy. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we need. I think, you know, with this judgment, I think a lot of our members of the public and residents are probably surprised at how important our legal services are in this. You know, social work is something which is completely bound up with the law, which is obvious to all of you, but you know, I don't know if it is obvious to everybody, and just how important it is. So that would be really great. Thank you. I welcome that. And while I'm on, could I just say that it's great to have Jane here as well. Is it a new role in Healthwatch, Jane?
Yes, it is. Previously, I've been the director of Healthwatch for over 4 years, Previously and still, I was a director for primary care in the NHS, and I still sit on various committees and boards within the health service in Herefordshire and Worcestershire, as well as sitting on NHS X, which is the digital arm of the NHS centrally.
Thanks, it's great to have you.
It is. Yeah, and can I just now introduce Kath Knowles, who obviously has had difficulty getting into the system, and I'm really pleased that she's been able to now join us. So welcome, Kath. For the benefit of some members who we have co-opted members of this committee, would you perhaps give a little brief outline of what you're doing here and a bit about your background? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, and my sincere apologies. I've for the last really frustrated getting on, and it wouldn't allow me in. I could see everybody, but I couldn't see anybody. So yes, my name's Catherine Knowles, and I'm the interim director for Children's Services. My background is I'm a qualified social worker with over 35 years experience, and also a qualified nursery nurse. So an NEB way back in the day. I've worked extensively across children's services, primarily for the last 12 years or more as a senior leader, a director and improvement lead, working across a number of councils, supporting them in improvement delivery. I was part of the improvement team that went into Rochdale in 2012 on the back of the child sexual exploitation, and supported the council in what was a very challenging time for them. As I know, it's going to be a challenging time for us here in Herefordshire. I'm also a childcare expert advisor to the National Crime Agency, and this is where I support police forces where there is a potential a crime against a child and they need a childcare expert, so I provide reports for them. I've just completed a historical case for Scotland, actually, Aberdeenshire, but it's down the country, whichever police force. I've worked right across children's services, child protection, but also children with disabilities, residential, youth justice, manage those areas, and in particular children's homes, fostering, adoption, agency decision making. So I'm here to come and I'm here to support this service and make the improvements that needs to be made in light of the judgment, but also in light of what Ofsted said, but also what recommendations Ofsted. So we need to sort of do a little bit of resetting of everything. So the judgment is has been far-reaching, but there's other challenges there that we need to be picking up and doing as well. And I'm really looking forward to working with the scrutiny committee and restoring some confidence in the directorate with you all, because I realise that's been seriously tested.
Thank you,
Chair.
And in order to perhaps assist Kath, I realise it's not on the agenda, but so what? Perhaps we could just go round the room and introduce ourselves and say, in the case of Sam, the COPT, who you're representing, and the rest of us, what area we represent and how long we've been on the council. So if I start with Sam Prattley.
Yeah, hello, Kath. Hello, everybody. So Sam Prattley, my job title is the Diocesan Secretary, which is the closest you'll get to a Chief Executive of the Hereford Diocese. I'm the co-optee for the Church of England schools, and so represent specifically on this committee those Church of England schools for the Diocese of Hereford.
Thank you,
hello, Sam.
Kath.
It's going to get confusing with these Kaths, isn't it?
Good name, though.
At least I'm okay. Yeah. So Councillor Kath Hay, ward member for College in the City. I was elected in 2019, so a relative newbie. But in my previous life, I was a primary teacher, so I taught in inner city London for quite a few years. So I felt like I've my stripes to a certain extent in terms of being able to contribute to this committee. So obviously I look forward to working with Kath and all the other officers moving forwards.
Philip.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and hello, Kath, and good to hear from you. Everybody else too. Yeah, I'm Philip Howells. I'm Ledbury Town Councillor and also, of course, the Ward Councillor for Ledbury West. Also got elected in 2019, although a year longer in Ledbury. Actually, the reason I got involved in this, I've been in this committee for 2 years now since I was elected and learning a lot. Feel getting more effective now into the second year, and took Carol's point about continuity of this committee. And I know you were pleased, and all of us, that we all stood again for a second year. And I'm sure that benefits the committee. And the reason I got involved, really, I didn't really expect to be particularly, but I was the mayor of Ledbury as well in the year before last, and I adopted youth as my theme because I just felt that the youth are so great, and they often aren't appreciated or promoted as they should. And it was a young councillor who got me involved, very young. He's only 20, so I decided to do more for youth in that year. And then the opportunity to come on the Children's Services Scrutiny Committee came along, and I thought that was compatible with it. And I have to say, it's been very fulfilling and rewarding to feel we can make a difference, and look forward to helping to do so, hopefully for the life of this council, because I think it's extremely important work.
Thank you, Philip. Graham.
Graham Andrews. Again, I'm quite a new councillor, so I was elected in 2019. I sort of fell into this scrutiny committee, substituting for somebody once, and have never left. So you can either take that as a positive or a negative of it. But I really enjoy this. It's a topic that I've tried to stay with and try and support the best I can. My background is manufacturing, where I've managed people for 35 years of small teams, adult teams, junior teams, massively from having 5 people up to 200 people, and run sort of global safety projects around. So I like this type of work. I'm also the chairman of Hinton Football Club, where we look after 350 people through football and deliver a really successful environment for the people of Hereford. So really keen. And I have 3 young daughters, so I'm quite keen on this subject.
Thank you, Graham. Diana.
Yes, I'd like to big up Hinton Football Club because it's in the Great Greyfriars ward, and it does a great job. And I'm particularly thrilled when I go down and there are girls training. It's really fabulous. So I'm Diana. I'm the ward councillor for Greyfriars, which is to the west of Hereford along the river. I was also elected in 2019. I've got a background in education, primary, secondary, and adult and training, and I used to train primary teachers in France. I think there are quite a few of us teachers on the council and not enough social workers, so we really need to get that balance, and it's great to have you here, Kath. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'm Cara Gandy. I represent Mortimer Ward, which is in the furthest north and west of the county. So I border Wales and Shropshire. It's an extremely rural area. It's 60 square miles with only about 50 people to the square mile. I've been on Herefordshire Council since 2015. And prior to that, I was on Redditch Borough Council for 20 odd years, which was a second tier authority, a new town, high levels of deprivation. I worked in the health service for 30 odd years in radiology, but I've also worked in youth work years ago as well. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Right, so we're looking at the work programme. The first thing I would be really grateful for some steer from Kath, really. Can I just ask, Kath, do you prefer to be called Kath or Catherine?
Kath. When I get Catherine, I always feel as I'm in trouble off Mum. So it's used to be Sunday name Catherine. So Kath, Kath's fine. Thank you.
So the work programme at the moment, We have on the work programme at each meeting, apart from the budget meeting, a review of performance and progress against the Safeguarding and Family Support Improvement Plan. Now, I have talked to Andy outside of this meeting about the way that this is presented and the fact that I don't find it particularly helpful. Some of it is, but some of it probably isn't. And it's an awful lot of figures and graphs, and I think we tend to get bogged down with so much detail that we probably miss the really important things that we need to be looking at. So I would like Andy perhaps to give us a flavour of what he thinks we could do to do this better. But I just wonder how this will fit going forward with the feedback of the work that the review, the improvement board is going to be doing. And so I just wonder, you know, whether you think it should still be in the work programme, or and I'm also of a view that probably if we're going to be having feedback from the improvement board, that we would probably want separate meetings for that specifically, because I don't want it to get squeezed. I want members to have a real good opportunity to look at it. And sometimes with our meetings, if we have more than one large meaty item, we tend not to probably do it as good much justice as we could do. So yeah. Andy, could you just give us a view of what you think might be an improvement when you've unmuted?
I was going to say you unmute, Andy.
I'll tell you what, the guy that invented the T-shirt that says "you're on mute" must be making an absolute mint at the moment. It's interesting though, isn't it, that we've been doing this "you're on mute." How many times do we still on mute when we're talking? It's amazing. If you counted that all up. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Get back to the question, Andy. So, from my previous experiences, there's two things really, and I think I might have said this to colleagues before. Not all the data is born equal. Not all the data is born equal. And we talked, didn't we, a bit about the need to focus more on the quality of practice. That is going to be at the heart of the future improvement programme. We're going to continue with signs of safety, but we'll use that as a vehicle to understand the consistency of practice. But also the other areas, the so what question. I mean, I think it is my previous experience with scrutiny. You will want to ask us, okay, we've looked at all these processes and dials and trends and whatever. Tell us, Andy and Kath, give us some evidence that we're actually making a difference to the lives of children and families. Tell us that story, and let's have a bit of a support and challenge discussion around that. So to give you an example, and I don't think we've spent enough time on this, before the judgment, we did a major survey of feedback from children and families about what they were telling us about the quality and the impact of the services that we've been delivering. I think it would have been a really good opportunity to scrutinise that, understand some of the stories, but also to look at what families are telling us around how we need to improve our services. So that's bringing the data alive. The second point, I think, what I've been used to, and I was talking to Kath this morning about, is as members, you decide you want to do a bit of a deep dive on a particular area. So Carol's come up around peer on peer next time, that's fine. But in terms of forward planning, where else do you want to go? Do you want to look at domestic abuse? Do you want to look at neglect? Do you want to look at looked after children numbers? Or even something more specific than that? So I think that, you know, out of adversity, folks, does come opportunity. And it's extremely sad, and I'm not going to diminish that in terms of what happened to this family. But this is an opportunity to recast a bit and to look at how you, as members, would like to use this time that we have together to perhaps do some of those things that I've just given some examples about.
Kath.
That's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Andy around, you know, sort of the so what questions and the quality. But I actually have to say, in the report you've got, I can well understand why you find that sort of too graphy, too techy. You know, because and it even when I was reading it, I was thinking, okay, what does that mean? What does that say? So it does require. I'm used to a mixture, almost an eclectic mixture of, you do need some performance data, and it needs to be accumulative. So it shows whether there's a progress or it's a decline. So it stimulates a conversation. But also the deep dive bit that Andy's talked about, I think that's absolutely right. Let's have a little closer look at this. But I like, and Andy knows this, I like something called heat maps. So if you take, for instance, what do you know around the current children that are in our care? And when I say in our care, I'm talking about children that are currently open, that are children in need, child protection plans, or looked after, including our care leavers. Where did they come from? What was the precipitating factor that brought them into statutory services? Could we have done something differently to have prevented that and supported the family differently? So sometimes if you do a heat map that maps across Herefordshire where these children came, how many are in your areas that are looked after children or that were child protection or child in need? And what resources and commissioning services do we have in? And are they the right ones that meet the needs of the children, so that we don't have any more children coming into the care system or into child protection? Because actually we need to do something more on an early intervention, prevention, local solutions offer. So how are we getting into that? And that's when data becomes rich. So it's about understanding underneath the data as well. What's the data telling us that we know about these children? And how could we do things differently to and the ones that need to be with us absolutely will come through. But there's a number of children that probably would have been better at early intervention and prevention through a local solutions offer and commissioning offer. We might be able to, you know, support families and keep children together and at home, which is what we are really as social workers. That's what we want to do. We want to support families. That's the idea. So to me, there's something about there's more to just the numbers and the graphs. And I'd like to work with yourselves and obviously with the team to redesign what we're doing that makes it valuable to you, but actually teases those questions out and makes you question a bit more and say, well, hang on, what about that? And if there's a particular what I call a hotspot area, you've got a hotspot area. Why is that area a hotspot? Why have we got all that happening? And have we got the right services in there to help families that are vulnerable or in need? Deprivation, poverty, you know, and Councillor Gandhi, you've talked about that when you were a councillor in Redditch. You probably have a really good understanding of that. But you know, for the newer councillors, you know, that have come, that's the sort of a thing. So I would like to try and do an eclectic blend of a performance report and that's the sort of thing that will feed into your improvement board, will feed into your children's safeguarding partnerships. So it's a report that hits everybody's agenda and works for everybody. So that would be one of the things
I think I don't know about others, but I find frustrating is we get the figures for the number of looked after children. So the last account, there were 321 looked after children. We get told how many of them are boys and how many of them are girls. I'm not sure that is necessary for us. I mean, what can we do about that? Nothing. We get told the age, what ages they are. Again, it's interesting, but I'm not sure it's relevant to us. What we don't know is how long those children have been looked after. So we don't know, certainly our committee doesn't know, and I can't find this when we go to a performance challenge meeting. We don't know whether the work that we're doing on early help, children in need, signs of safety, whether that's working to reduce the number of children coming into care. So we've got a large number of children. As a local authority, we have got a greater proportion of children in care than we ought to have, than our statistical neighbours have. And it may be that the vast majority of those have been in care a long time, and we were perhaps risk averse at that time, and we are now seeing as signs of those numbers reducing, but we don't really know. We have no knowledge of that. And so for me, it's not about just producing a statistic that says this is how many children we've got in care. I want to know, how long have they been in care? Is there any likelihood, if they've been in care for 5, 6, 7 years, that we're going to actually get them adopted or get a special guardianship order or return them to home? Or is it just the fact that we're going to have to recognise that as an authority, they will pass through the system and out the end? And yes, we will have a large number of young people in care for a significant period of time. And therefore, the pressure that the judgment team to give, which was pressure being put on social workers to reduce the number of looked after children, we would have a realistic idea of how realistic is that, because we are dealing with children who've perhaps been here a long time. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think what you've just said is in another area would be absolutely important for us to know about.
So why did they come in care?
Yes.
So that we can do the preventative work
Yes.
as well. And that those two come together. And you're absolutely right in terms of understanding that how long have they been in care and what is their care plan. And I keep hearing this sort of language of lack reduction policy, and it's not a lack reduction. What you want to know is what is our permanency planning policy. And that permanency planning policy may have a number of aspects. Children will remain in care because that is in their best interest and in the welfare of the child, using the welfare checklist in line with the Children Act of 1989. And that's because it's right for them, and they're safe with their foster carers, but they have a good relationship with their parents, and they don't particularly, and they know they can't live with their parents, and that might be because of mental health. So if we've got a cohort of children that are in long-term care, that are going to stay in long-term care to their majority, to their 18th, well, what's some of the precipitating factors around that decision making? Well, it's because of their parents have got mental health problems or other that prevents them from the child ever being returned home. But they have a good working relationship. You may have kinship care where you place it. You may have adoption. You may have children that do go to SGOs. There's a range, but permanency planning isn't just about SGOs. Permanency planning is around what is in the best interest of this child, how timely is it, what's it like, and that's the sort of information you need. But also, why did they come into care in the first place? What was that journey like? And could we have done something different to have stopped it in the first place and help them stay together as a family? And could we have done more of a wraparound support? And when you think around, you start thinking about cost, your social care, your social workers, that's your highest cost. But if we could invest some of that cost into early intervention and remove that spend there and keep children at home, and that's the best outcome for children, is it not? So it's that blend that I think, and I think there's work to be done on this. And then that will assist what Andy's saying, because then you can start going into your deep dives. So can we understand a little bit more about this? Can we have a spotlight session that allows us to do this and not have a sort of an agenda that has lots and lots and lots of things that you never seem to get to the end of and then go away thinking, not sure I've achieved anything today. So that sort of balancing act really is what I would say.
So Andy, could we perhaps work it? I mean, the information that you provide goes to performance challenge. Now, I don't know whether performance challenge is continuing, because that's not my area. But if it is, I attend, and all of my scrutiny members are able to attend. Could we then rather than have all of those statistics coming quarterly to our meetings, could we have themed info?
Absolutely.
We could, on this occasion, we say at the next meeting we've got performance challenge. We could say, right, well, we'll do looked after children.
Yeah.
And then we've got, I don't know what other members might feel. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do that, Carol. But I think it's down, and you'll probably need support with this. But it's down to members of scrutiny or performance challenge to come up with so we're looking at looked after children. So what would be your top 2 or 3 questions that you would want to focus the discussion on? So that you're in a supported way showing the leadership, I guess, around that deep dive thematic discussion, if you like.
Yeah.
So I think, whether we use the next performance challenge to look at some of those killer questions, as I say, that you would like to look at, or whether we do it outside of the session, absolutely, up for that. And I think Kath's right. I will, because I get off on performance data and quality assurance, sad man that I am, having done this for about 10 or 15 years. And I share data with social workers around looked after children, and they just see the number. So they always and I said, well, what do you see? And they, well, I see the number, and I know it's what you're interested in, Andy. And I said, no, actually, you should be interested in that. I should be interested in that, because when I see a trend or a date or data, I see children's lives. That's what I see. So we look at that trend around looked after children. You then develop 2 or 3 questions to get at the children's life bit that you're interested in, and picking up some of the questions that Kath and yourself was posing, Carol. And then we have we share information. We might have some encouraging information, if you like, around what good looks like. Actually, we know we're making a difference in relation to this group of children. It looks like this. We also know from the data we're not doing so well on this particular area. It could be around early intervention or whatever it might be, and we just have a good, robust support and challenge discussion. And out of that, some good ideas will come in terms of what next.
Graham.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Graham.
I'm gonna sound very similar to you, Andy, to be honest, because you've nicked off me questions there, but that's all right. But what I've written down is the bit that I get frustrated with is I'm not completely convinced I know what this directorate is trying to really achieve. But I know the overall term, what you're going to say and what we want from it. I know that. But if I ask you, drive it down and give me 5 things that you said you were going to achieve the next 18 months, give me the timelines, what the skills are, what the outputs are going to be, I don't honestly believe that would be provided to me on what I would expect to see is like an industrial way of running something, where you would say, I think I will hit this target by then. It may not be perfect. I may accept good, because actually, if you take us from our current position this week, we can be, anything is going to be good than what we received on Tuesday. So it builds confidence and purpose into something you're going to design. And the bits looking through the work plan already, bits that I see that are missing are things like timelines. You've got a start date, but nobody tells me that's going to take me 8 weeks or 8 months or 5 years. And I'm going to tell you, you haven't got those timelines. They need to be in there really short and punchy to make an impact now. So you've got some big projects. Okay, admit them. They're big projects. They could take a year, 2 years. But you've got items that could be turned around really quickly, I suspect. Especially, as Andy, as you say, I quite like the data. I mean, root cause analysis is my actually go-to place for loads of stuff. If soon as somebody mentions they're going to do a 5 why, I'm already in the room. I want to get on with it. Let's get on with it. So it's not a bad thing to do, and I really support getting on it. But they don't need to take forever. And sometimes you don't need to ask all 5 whys to realise where the cock up is. You can find it really quickly, and that answer is good enough for what you need to be in that timeline. And I would like to see us have, I quite like the way we changed it to have KPIs and performance indicators that were actually graphical. Because when I first joined this, it seemed to be a story. It was like, once upon a time, this happened on the 1st of the month, and we had a lot of words. And to be honest, I haven't got the time to read a lot of words, to be honest. I just want to see if we're in spec or out of spec, and are we moving in the right direction? So I would try to encourage you not to lose some of that sort of scorecard stuff.
No, I'm not suggesting we lose it. I'm just saying that there's some of it I think is not of importance to us.
I'd agree.
And I have to say, I may be alone in this, but I do not personally, from my point of view, see any purpose in receiving self-assessments from lead social workers who then score what they think how their department is running. I don't on a quarterly basis. I struggle to understand, for me, for us, what the benefit of that is. Because human nature is you're going to give yourself at least a 6, possibly a 5. You're never going to give yourself a 3. And we've never seen anything other than a 5.5. And it may be useful for heads of service to see it, but I'm not sure for scrutiny
I agree, Carol. That was I wanted to see where that went, really, when they were doing that, to see how it continued to work, because you're right, everyone appoints themselves as a 5 or a 7, so they can be knocked down to a 5. So it's we all know that game works.
I have to say there has been 3s and 4s in the past, but I get that. And I think what I wanted to say about that is, if it's not useful for you, fine. We won't put it in. But it is part of holding managers to account and providing evidence around any score that they give. So we've got a support and challenge process around where managers are quizzed on the rationale for their particular judgments. But if you don't want it, that's fine.
Cool. I think that the one bit for me to finish, Andy, before I let somebody else take the floor, is where you're saying, no, you're looking for us to maybe give you the questions where you think you should drill down to. I'm going to flip that around and actually say, no, actually, you're the experts in the room. So when you've got all that fantastic data in there, I actually think you should be coming to tell us and exposing the points where we are weak and telling us where we should be stronger. And then from then give you some guidance to say, actually, we think you should be looking, if you use Cass hotspots idea, there's something within the Greyfriars and King's Acre wards, because 2 of us are in the room, so I can say those 2. And we should be looking at the people that are focused on that. And why is it those catchment areas have got this? And is it related to schools? Is it related to shops, traffic routes, whatever it is, and find out that, because the experts are ones that are collecting this data. You know who's coming into your services, you know who's leaving your services, and where the problem is. I will not know that to provide you with a question that's going to generate us going forward.
Yeah, okay. I was responding really to Carol's points, really, about killer questions that she wanted answers to. But I'm not diminishing. You're right. We get paid a lot of money to do the work that we do, to understand some of the causes and forces at work around looked after children numbers and the story behind that. I think what I was trying to do is to co-produce it. Okay, we bring to bear that expertise, and we'll shine a light on particular issues, and we'll work with you to make sure that you have an input into some of those killer questions that you want answers to, based on professional understanding and awareness that we have to bring to that conversation.
Absolutely. As a directorate, you're never in a better opportunity to be really open to us now, to show us how dirty the laundry is.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, there's a basket full of it. And, it's going to have to come out, and it's going to have to be washed, and it's going to have to be repositioned. Do we want to keep it? Do we just clean it and use it again because it was just badly used? Or are we going to ditch it and go and buy some new stuff and get on with it? And I think you've got a great opportunity to get everything out. And me and Carol had a bit of a conversation about that yesterday, really. So things have been said about senior people misleading people.
I just want to give you assurance, in the year that I've been here, I have never misled anyone.
No, I don't think
In
anybody.
terms of the
No,
data
not
that
saying
was.
No.
Well, yeah.
I don't think anybody. I don't think, to be fair, Andy, and I said to you on the phone, nobody, in as far as I can say with my committee, would ever have accused you of that. This is a historical thing that's gone on. What I think Graham is really getting at is the fact that we have an opportunity now, which has come about as a result of something which was pretty awful, but it is an opportunity. So we have to look at the positives that can come out of this. And the positives are to look at all the services across the directorate and ensure that the well-being of the child is at the heart of everything we do and we say. But also we have an opportunity now to restore the trust within, as from the point of view of children's scrutiny, with regards to officers, so that we can be sure that what we're being told, and we won't be told everything, and we understand that entirely, but what we're being told when we ask the question is the truth. And we want to know warts and all. We don't want to have it sort of giving the impression that everything is fine, or it's a bit of a challenge, but we'll manage. It's not, it's okay. We want to know when it isn't okay, and because we want to help you to make it okay. That's what we're here for. We're here to, we're not here to criticize. We're here to be critical friends and to say to you, okay, we recognize this is hard. It is hard. We've got 321 looked after children, and we've got other children who are on child protection plans and early help. And it's a really difficult thing. And you are making judgments every day, which I wouldn't want to have to make. And I recognize how difficult it is. And there will be mistakes. There always will be mistakes. But we want to help you. And I think in the past, and it's not reflected on anybody in this room, in the past, I think people have tried to give the impression too much of holding back and being very defensive about things that perhaps were not going as well as they thought they ought to, and that we would savage them if they didn't admit that, if they admitted that things were not going as they wanted it to do. Anyway, I'll move on to Kath.
Is that Councillor Hay or me?
Yeah, that's me now, I think.
Sorry.
You're off the hook, I think, Kath, for a minute. I'm gonna have to change my name, I think, aren't I? To avoid confusion. Obviously fantastic to just to hear everyone having this discussion in an open forum like this. I think it's really useful, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? We're having to go back to the bare bones, and that's part of what my thinking is about all this. I mean, I've sat and listened to and looked at bare statistics for a couple of years now, and I'm now realizing that in isolation is no good whatsoever, because that's only telling a very, very small part of the whole picture. And maybe, I feel that I should have asked more questions in lots of areas, but you can only ask questions based on what you know. So if you're not, knowledge is power, isn't it? So if you don't know the information in the first place, you cannot ask the right questions. So really kind of going back to, we know that there were 14 recommendations made from children's scrutiny back in 2019. And yes, I still don't seem to have had an answer in terms of what happened there, why those recommendations have sort of lost in the ether. So let's start again. Let's go from here. But in terms of the work programme, it just feels to me we're kind of doing it the wrong way around, because until we've got the improvement plan, until we know where we're headed, I worry that we're kind of committing to too much in terms of the work programme, because we don't know what we're necessarily going to turn up and what we're going to necessarily need to focus on. So whether we need to have a bit of flexibility with the work programme in terms of,
I think Kath, what we're looking at is if with the improvement strategy, that what we're looking at is we would hold separate meetings. Some of the things, some of the items on here, and we will go after Philip's spoken, we will go through each meeting of the work programme. Some of the items on the work programme, we have a statutory obligation to review. So they are there because we have to look at them. So the youth justice plan and the corporate parenting strategy, and then I think somewhere down the list there'll be the I don't know if it's on this one, but there'll be, no, it's not on this one, but there will be, oh yes there is, adoptions and fostering supports, they'll be on there, and obviously the budget and things.
Obviously the standard,
so there will be flexibility, because what I'm hoping we can do is, and when we go on to it, is about flexibility around not necessarily setting dates for meetings to look at the improvement strategy coming foot down, but to have them when we need them.
Okay, cool. So yeah, as you say, yeah, that's great to hear. Because yeah, I'm just getting my thread back. Yeah, I mean, what came out to me sort of as part of the judgment was this idea of families feeling disenfranchised in the process of dealing with children's services, and we need to, again, yeah, continue to build relationships where families do really feel involved in every stage of processes. And going back to what Andy said earlier about this survey that was done, and the fact that, you know, families were asked how can we do things better, or how you know, how have you experienced things, and maybe not have used that more to inform, you know, what can be done better. So I think it's maybe a missed opportunity if we don't, as I say, use that and in a way that you know, because ultimately, if you, why ask otherwise, unless that's going to inform work as well. Right, thank you.
Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. By the way, I've just found a new tip. When people struggle to find the mute button, if you press the space bar, it immediately mutes you.
Does it?
Yeah.
Do it again. So
yeah.
Just press it and immediately you're unmuted, and release it and you're muted again. So if
doesn't always work.
It doesn't always
quick. Yeah, we've got very, very quick, just immediate. So that's a good tip. Yeah, I want to reinforce really what people said already, because I think that's quite important. I think it bears reiteration. I didn't say when I introduced myself, I was a business consultant for many years, working quite large companies across Europe, the world, in fact, in the IT industry. And a lot of the things we did was customer satisfaction surveys. And there were two types of company. There was the one company who wanted you to pick all the best customers who are already happy, so they could promote it and say how good we are. And then the other companies said, we do a pretty good job. And in fact, they're the ones, ironically, who did a good job, but they always wanted to say, find out where the problems are, what we're not doing that we could do better. And that's the opportunity that presents itself here. And I've already discussed with Carol, after 2 years, a point that came to mind was that, and it's back to what we said about people not underrating themselves, or at least it takes the brave and courageous who really want to learn to do that. And you're quite right, Andy, some people do. And they're trusting that when they score themselves a 3, they're not actually saying I'm not any good at my job. It's just, actually, I know it needs to be done better. And they're rare. That is the truth. It's rare. But we should encourage that. It should be a two-way process. So my critique, if you like, and it's constructive, is that we tend to get the good news, and particularly in the challenge performance, I think, we get lots of data and we do most things really well. So we get that. But I, as a consultant, I always prided myself in asking the awkward question, saying, well, actually, what isn't working? And I take Graham sort of took the wind out of my sails a bit, because I totally agree with him. It isn't just a case of us saying this is what we'd like to look at. But I mean, this year we looked at 2 issues that weren't raised to us automatically, but we found out about them. It shouldn't be that way. I would like to think that officers should feel confident enough to say, actually, there's a problem here. You know, we're reviewing all this data and these 9 things are working really well. And we're just telling those, so they're working well. But actually, this area we're really concerned about. This is what you'd like to look at. So, you know, I think to come to the committee with points that we're concerned and there's a trend that this might be something we should look at. And frankly, that had happened during all the things we hear about the judgment, then the judgment wouldn't have happened. You know, if those questions had been asked along the line about saying, are we doing what we were asked to do? And if not, why not? So I think there's a two-way process. And I made the point on at the council meeting on on Tuesday, that we should be, officers should be raising things with scrutiny to say, will you have a look at this because we're a bit concerned, or data's going in the wrong direction, or whatever. But it should be that two-way process. And this is an opportunity to rethink just what we do with scrutiny. I mean, we have obviously a very limited time to do only a very limited number of subjects. But I think to pick the top things that are really not working well and have those as our main priority would be something that would be really worth looking at, and as I say, could obviate hopefully any chance that we can have sort of things that we were discussing on Tuesday happen again. So that's a reiteration, but I think we can't emphasize that point too much. It should be a two-way process. Thanks, Chair.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Conscious we're slipping slightly away from the work plan and a bit into the processes of questioning and decision making. But I do think it's quite important because, you know, I'm relatively new to the committee and often have 50 or 60 questions that I quite like to ask, particularly because we get given a lot of information and data. And, you know, you end up having to select the 2 or 3 things that you particularly want to ask, which still leaves a number of questions unanswered. But also things like our engagement with members of the public. We've got quite tight protocols, which can make it a little difficult to ask the sort of questions and enter into the sort of dialogue that particularly members of the public are keen to ask. And I just wonder whether we can be a little bit more, we can choose some topics to talk about, but enable more of a conversation rather than the kind of grandstanding which happens where you ask 3 or 4 questions, you accept the answer, and then we move on to the next thing without the conversation and dialogue. And I accept that some of this is the limitation of Zoom meetings and the time and the amount of agendas. But it just strikes me that I think sometimes we don't ever get to the nub of the question that we're trying to ask. And some of that's our process that we could do better, perhaps.
Kath.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I don't disagree with what anybody's saying here, and particularly the bit around we're the experts in the room, and therefore we should be providing you with some information that stimulates a conversation and a question. It's not giving you the questions, it stimulates. You say, oh, hang on a minute, what's that about? And that comes by good analysis in your data. So what's missing from performance data for me is the analysis. So what is this data telling us? And why should we be concerned? And I think that's the gap. And I think that's a little bit, I think that Councillor Andrews, was referring to. So it's that, so what's the analysis? It's what's it telling us? And should we be concerned about this? And that's the brave question that you ask. The improvement board will give you your priorities because they will set the priorities that we need to do. And I will put it out here right at this moment in time, that you will not get anything other than the truth from me. And some of it will be uncomfortable to hear, but I will not be ashamed or hide it because you need to hear it. There is challenges, and the challenges around our workforce. We have an absolute brilliant set of social workers, but they're all new. We've got a high percentage of newly qualified social workers, and we need to develop these social workers, and we need to give them the time to develop these social workers. So there is challenges around how do we do that, managing the work coming through into the service whilst we try and manage those social workers. So for me, there's something about where's the principal social worker report to you around how are staff feeling, how are staff managing. So I've talked about having a principal social work annual report. So what's been going on? What have we been doing in terms of our development? And how has that made a difference and impact in the children that we're working with? So there's lots of things, but your improvement board will set the priorities, and from that you will get what you feel will help your work programme. And I think I said on Tuesday, there would be an expectation that the chair of this board sits on the improvement board, so that golden thread, that connectivity will be there. So you will be expected to sit on there, and I know you want to sit on that so that you can see what's happening. And out of that will come the improvement plan. And what you'll end up with is a sort of a high level plan with a number of priorities, and then sat behind that plan is a much more detailed plan. You'll want those top priority plans. So where are we? What's happening? What's the timeline? And the timeline is the most crucial thing. We talk about children drifting and delaying because we're not doing good quality permanency planning and we're not getting that right. Well, we should be doing that. That permanency planning is a timeline in your improvement journey and in your performance data. So we should have timelines. We are going to do this by this. And if we've not, and that's turned red, then hang on a minute, you said you do that. What's happened? What's gone wrong? And, you know, and I'll take that and say, yeah, I should. And this is what's happened. And that's not good enough. Well, this is what I'm now doing about it to correct it. So it has to be like that for me. Timelines are crucial. Good analysis and your improvement plan will help inform what those priorities, and in turn may help you formulate your work programme going forward. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Gandy, you have got some statutory duties to fulfil and you cannot take them off. So maybe you have a sort of a two-pronged approach at this. You have what's called your normal statutory Children and Scrutiny Board, and we may have periodically extraordinary scrutiny boards that's single focused and themed, and that'll bring in the improvement plan to allow the rest of the scrutiny committee to have that opportunity to hear what you're going to hear on a regular basis when you attend the board, and where we're going and what's happening in the improvements. Out of that board will come a performance data set that the DFE will really want to see is saying what it should do, and evidence. Again, that will inform what the performance data we want to look at and a bit more. Does that make sense? So I think absolutely you've got to have your statutory, that's non-negotiable. But then what can we put in between to allow the quality conversations that we're having today, if I'm honest, around what is going wrong, what's the matter, what are you worried about? And let's have that honest conversation.
Thank you. Matt, would you like to display the work programme on the screen?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kath, did you want to say something?
Chair, sorry, just very quickly before we move on to that. I was just on that, and what's just been said was that I think, yeah, and again, in the back of my mind, I'm conscious of the fact we certainly our focus has to be on obviously the very, very important issues, but I don't want the other issues that we've obviously flagged up previously to be forgotten, especially with schools, or the obviously the issues with mental health in schools, etc. And I think as you say, it's going to be getting that balance, isn't it, of trying to fit in the statutory things, the really, really important things that need attending to straight away, but also, I mean, and we've had things like obviously the dental health issues, etc., obesity in children, which again have all come up as a result of COVID.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be spinning a lot of plates. I think what Kath just said about having separate sort of fractions almost of the committee, to focus on different areas might be an idea going forwards, because they say you can't do everything because it's a lot of
well, it dilutes it too much, Councillor Hay.
Yeah, that's it, and that's my worry. Yeah, I like to. Yeah, I'm much better at working, as you say, focused on one certain area. Obviously education. That's obviously an area I've got experience of, and I like to. I'm going to say mental health in young people for me is a very, very big issue, and obviously raised it several times, and obviously the SEND pupils as well, which again we can't lose sight of, obviously. So yeah, as you said.
And that's a really good point, Councillor, because you've not had your SEND inspection. That'll be coming. There's going to be a SEND inspection. Every local authority is going to be inspected, and we've seen some of the outcomes. If you look at some local authorities that had their SEND inspection, they've ended up with written statement of actions because it's not been good enough. So I'm not saying that's happening, because that's something I'm working with Kerry around. Where are we with SEND? How are we doing with SEND? And that's the sort of thing.
Yeah,
so that
you're
has to be discussed.
Yeah,
because
I'm preempting things, because I had a meeting with a lady who's represents the National Autistic Society, and she was talking about Senkos in schools, and obviously how the number of Senkos in schools has reduced over time. And she said, I don't know when there was last a review of Senkos and the Senko schools. And again, it's trying to preempt those issues that might appear further and keeping them in mind. So, not to scare anyone, but we better clear our diaries for the next year. I think.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, if you'd like to display the work programme.
Yeah. Okay. So just to clarify, so to take account of what Kate Charlton said earlier, there will need to be an additional meeting of the committee before the 21st of May, which will focus on how Legal have worked with children's services over the last year and how they intend working with children's services over the forthcoming year. Now, the date that we've provisionally got for that meeting is the 20th of May at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, and I suggest that as we've been talking about additional scrutiny meetings that will be needed throughout the year, I will add a note to the work programme to explain that as and when is required, we will arrange additional meetings to look at the outputs from the improvement board, if that wording is acceptable.
Yeah, and we need to add to the programme for the 1st of June the review of the peer-on-peer recommendations.
Okay, is that going to come as part of the improvement plan?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Okay.
No, it's
no.
I think it's a single review you're thinking about, aren't you, Kath?
Yeah, I'm talking about the recommendations that came from the scrutiny review we did. I think it needs to be separate.
I'd agree. I'd agree.
It's a very important issue, and I think we need to give it. I mean, what I would suggest, and this is only, shoot me down if you wish. With regards to the review of performance and progress against safeguarding, Q4, what I would suggest is if we actually receive from Andy some information, instead of that as it is, if we put in the peer-on-peer review recommendations, and we receive from Andy a report on the looked after children, numbers, breakdown of length of time, hotspots as to where they are at the moment, and also regard and we work from that, and we start as that, and we work and we have some discussion at that meeting around what we would like to see going forward. But that would be a start. I don't know what other members think.
I agree with you, Carol.
You do?
I think there's a lot of nodding heads.
Okay, I can't see anybody.
From what I can see, people are nodding.
If we start off with, we know, well, we have a rough idea of the numbers anyway, but they might, hopefully they could be slightly less. But if we have the numbers, the length of time that the young people have been in care,
the reason why they came into care, the number of placements they've had, type of placement, and if we can do it, and Andy, and this may be difficult, the number of social workers that they've had over the time they've been in care, and a hotspot map of where these children have come from, the wards that they've come from. That I think will be sufficient. It gives us something to start with. Can I suggest another question? Can I suggest the level of contact they have with their family?
Oh, yes.
Because that's a question, isn't it, in the judgment?
Yes, yeah.
And that picks up Councillor Hayes.
Whether they have regular contact, no contact, annual contact, occasional contact. Or whether they've been denied contact.
And maybe what is the care plan? Is it remaining in care?
Yeah.
Is it returning home?
Yeah.
Or is it adoption?
Yeah.
So what's the pathway for these children out of care? And some may be staying in care.
Is that all right, Andy? You've gone very quiet.
I've captured that, Councillor Gandhi, don't worry.
Is he dropped out? Or has he dropped? Has he fainted or something?
No, I'm still here. Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that all right,
Well, no,
Andy?
that just so that I'm clear, do you still, so you want less emphasis on religiously going through all the
Yes,
dates?
because I think we can do that at the performance challenge. And
Okay, all right, good. All right then.
This is just a trial. I mean, it
Yeah.
may change, but we every member of the committee is invited to performance challenge, and so even if they can't attend, they get the papers, so they know the data.
Yeah.
And I mean, if necessary, if any of our members don't, I'm quite happy to send an email around to members to say what the issues were that were raised at performance challenge, which were of concern, if members can't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, because there'll be less repetition.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because we attend the performance challenge.
Yeah, and then we do the same.
Holding back some questions because I know I'm going to have the same papers at scrutiny. And when the papers come to scrutiny, they're usually 2 months out of date.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a dedicated performance report with a theme on looked after children next time.
Yes. So is that all right, Matt?
Right, okay. So a dedicated performance report. I'm just going to repeat what Kath
A
said.
dedicated performance report around looked after children, addressing specific areas. And Matt, we'll catch up with you later. We'll catch it all.
Yeah, I think that'd be very useful. Yeah.
And then we've got the review of the peer-on-peer abuse recommendations, both from scrutiny and the 3 that came from cabinet. And then the report of work of prevent and disrupt. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Let's have a look at the July one. So we at the moment we will leave the July one as it sits, but we may be at the June one. We may make a change with regards to what we discussed at the July one.
Yeah, what's another dedicated report that looks
by then the board will have possibly, we'll look at something then. The members will have had a chance to give some thought to this. We've got the youth justice plan. Is that chap coming along, Matt?
I'll have to catch up with Chris Jones around this.
Can we get someone from the police?
We need to work out the timings. Yeah, we'll look to have someone from the police and the Youth Justice Board.
Right, and we've got the corporate parenting strategy annual update, and I think that's enough from there.
I just add a point of information there, Chair, please. On the Youth Justice Plan, it says the last line would inform the production of the plan for 2019-20. Shouldn't that be for 2021-22?
Yeah.
It should. That's a typo, Councillor Howes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
You're on the ball, Philip.
Hope so.
So we'll leave that one, the rest of that one as it is. Then we've got underneath there, we've also got leaving care and preparing for adulthood. Oh, I know what that was about. Yeah, that's about. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but.
I think you should leave that on personally. And I've got a new interim assistant director, Hilary Brooks, so we can get Hilary to report that.
Hilary Brooks.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I would have said this at the beginning. Hilary has only just started, and she's just taken on. She didn't have this in her diary, so she'd committed to a planning meeting.
So she's the new assistant director
in social care. So she's going to be looking after. So I think if we swap Jill's name to Hilary's and Liz to me and everything, we can sort of work it through. So we can do that, tidy that up afterwards with Matt. But I think you should leave it in, because I think there's an issue.
There is,
if I'm honest, about what we call NEETs, not in education and employment. And I think that that is an issue that's going to grow because of the pandemic. I think it's a national issue because of what happened with schooling and apprenticeship opportunities and businesses, you know, all of the impact that the pandemic had and the impact that has on young people moving for, you know, coming out of school and what they're doing. So I do think, I think that's something, and apprenticeships and where we're going with that. So I would leave that on personally.
Yeah, because we put that on initially because your voice matters. The young people there, saying that when they left care, that there were a lot of things that they didn't know how to do, like they didn't know how to cook, they didn't know how to budget, they didn't know that they didn't need to pay council tax, all those sort of things, because they weren't part of the mandatory requirements of their foster carers to teach them to cook, teach them to budget, that sort of thing. So that's originally why that went on there. So we'll leave that.
So, just on that as well, because it's just occurred to me, could we have some discussion around the Kickstart project as well? Because I know we've been asked to consult on that. And
down the budget, so is that down further?
I don't know, because so I've heard some quite negative things about the scheme of late, and in terms of how you know how many young people have been offered. Have
we not got something about employment somewhere?
Well, I thought that might be included under the impact of pandemic on opportunities for school and care leavers and mental health, and it's how the council is intending to address the impact on school and care leavers.
Quite current, I think, because we've had an email recently about consulting on it. So I know Kerry, I think, probably wants to come in on that. But
can I come in, folks, quickly on that one? I agree with that, Councillor. I think we should have something about a Kickstart and an update from our colleague Alex Heath about this, and we were planning to cover that in this item on the impact of the pandemic on opportunities for school and care leavers. And then as a kind of co-bit of that report will be about mental health support. Kath is right about the NEETs as well. If you remember, about 18 months ago, we were on the naughty step with the DfE for the level of NEETs too high, in the bottom quintile, I think, nationally. We were just coming out of that when the pandemic hit, but the issue remains. There'll be a lot of reduced opportunities for these youngsters. Where I'm going with this is that item there, impact of the pandemic on opportunities for school and care leavers. I would suggest that could cover Kickstart, Kath, if that's okay. And secondly, there's a sort of, it's almost like a separate report really about the mental health issue. So we were planning to give you kind of two bits of one report, if that makes sense on that bit.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just worried about the timescale because, I mean, in terms of it, that's another whole school year, September. I'm just thinking if there are, you know, issues with it, or whether it needs to be addressed sooner rather than...
The only way that we would be able to do that, Kath, and I understand what you're saying, the only way we would be able to do that is to swap the leaving care and preparing for adulthood with the impact on the pandemic. But the trouble is, I think the reason we left it to September was because of Kerry being able to get the necessary information, because the children, you know, I mean, when we get to the tracker, you'll see that a lot of that's drifted. And the reason some of that's drifted is because from when we first had the meeting back in 2020, they went back into lockdown again. And so actually all the children weren't at school. And so then they came back to school in the new year. So we could swap them.
Sorry, Chair. Can I make a suggestion, Chair? On the issue of actions to address mental health problems, I would suggest keeping that as a report. And you're right, we started to collect some data from schools. We didn't get much of a response. Only 10 replied, but that's partly because it was in the early stages of the reopening. So schools were preoccupied with testing and so on. So we put it back to September because we thought, actually, the reality is youngsters take time to disclose and show their mental health issues that may have happened. So it's got to be over this term, and schools would give a better response, frankly, if we gave them a few more weeks to do it. That's slightly different, though, from the issue above, which is the impact of school and care leave. You know, I think that might be that there's less impact of the timing to collect the data for that bit, if that makes sense, because some of that data exists already, is what you're suggesting, Councillor Kath, isn't it? If that makes sense. So that's two reports really, rather than one. If we swap them, I'm just thinking about that because there was a very specific bit about child asylum seekers and care leavers on the first bit, which we don't want to lose.
No. But
So
can I suggest you blend these? Because this is about, if you think about what you're asking, leaving care and preparing for adulthood, and I get Councillor Gandy, that's about the practical side, that they can put a kettle on and they know how to budget and all the rest. But it's also about being able to be independent and pay the council tax through jobs, apprenticeship, and school. So there is a connection between those two things. So if you blend it and put your mental health as a separate one, but you blend it about the impact of pandemic of opportunities and preparation for care leavers, another thing, I think you might be able to get, you'd probably be able to get the two together as a one sort of discussion and debate.
I think that's probably right. I would blend the leaving care and preparing for adulthood with the impact, the impact of the pandemic on employment opportunities. That's kind of one report, and then the mental health issues post-pandemic as a separate one. Really,
that's fine. I just want to make sure that you will have the information that you need by that July meeting.
I don't know is the honest answer on that. Really,
that's why I'm asking, because that's why I thought we put it into September. But I mean, the other way we can do it is we can incorporate leaving care and preparing for adulthood, and we could add a briefing on Kickstart, and just have that.
That's I'll get a briefing on Kickstart. And if there are concerns around that program, we can get that definitely for the
September meeting.
September, well, even sooner if needs be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.
So
Thank
the
you.
adoption and fostering is something we are required to do. And
excuse me, Chair. My hand up to talk about the previous.
Sorry, I missed it.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say that on the leaving care and preparing for adulthood, we should make sure that the youth champion, Councillor Anson, is involved in that.
Yeah.
She's obviously championed 16 to 22-year-old, and she might have either thoughts on what exists or what doesn't exist. So we should make sure she knows and incorporate what work she's doing to support youth. And this would be important to her, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Prattley's also got his hand up.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, while we were talking about schools, and particularly the support in schools, to flag up Gavin Williamson's announcement once again around the academisation agenda. And I just wonder whether that's something that we need to have on our radar. Certainly in the diocese, we've already had conversations with schools considering forming multi-academy trusts and coming together. And, given things like the fertile heart material that we've discussed, the peer-on-peer abuse, the way that schools are organised and governed has a huge impact on how children experience school. And I just wonder, if we're going to have a couple of reports on schools, we need to be thinking about the impact of academisation in doing so.
I wouldn't disagree, Sam. The only thing I would say is a lot of the noise around that at the moment is being driven by conference season and academy shows. So the people speaking are speaking above our heads, aren't they, to a different audience? But I think it is very lively out there in terms of the whole debate about academisation and you're right, in brackets, the funding routes to schools and the way they're governed and so on. That's quite a large strategic piece of work, isn't it? That will take a little while to settle, but it is coming, bluntly, again, I think. Now the pandemic's settling.
We put that on the bottom of our work programme with some other items that are down there that haven't actually been allocated. Because I do agree with Sam, but I think we just need to put it on the bottom at the moment because it's a big piece of work, and I am acutely aware that officers are under pressure at the moment. And I think we need to sort of try and get this one bottom out before we move on to something else. Okay. The Children's Centre Task and Finish scoping document, that will come to the meeting in July. And I will obviously be looking for people to serve on that task and finish and for someone to chair it as well. So just give that some thought. And then September, we've got the mental health side of the impact of the pandemic on school young school children and care leavers. Yes, Kerry?
That's correct. That's correct, Chair. We wanted all school children captured by that, though, didn't we?
Yeah,
with a reference to care leavers. That's right. And that would include input from public health as well, wouldn't it? I think, because they're doing mental health service.
Herefordshire Safeguarding Partnership annual report and the IRA annual reports. Goodness me. It may well be that there'll be another item to go on to that, which will be another focus item that we want to look at in some detail. Okay. Similarly, with the 23rd of November. Now, this, I don't know how many of, again, we might want to focus on something specific there. The dental and obesity. I can't comment too much on the obesity bit, but the dental bit. I attended a meeting yesterday, which was a presentation by Public Health. Child dental health is their focus for this coming financial year. They stated that as a result of a spotlight review we did 18 months ago, well, in fact, it was 2.5 years ago. And I pointed out at the time that, you know, we made recommendations to Public Health and to NHS England 2.5 years ago about oral health within the children of Herefordshire, which is, as we know, one of the poorest levels of oral health in the country. And they've only really decided to do anything about it now. And I'm still not convinced, because they don't seem to have any understanding as to why oral health in Herefordshire is so poor, that the suggestions that they're making for dealing with this will actually have any effect at all. But I think it's important it's there, and certainly Public Health can come along and give their presentation that I saw yesterday on what they're doing regarding both dental health and childhood obesity. And they're also doing some work around food in general, and working with our children's centres, etc., helping parents to eat healthily, recipes, that sort of thing. So I think that's an important one.
Kath Knowles has got her hand up, Chairman.
Kath, sorry.
Yeah, just on the dental health, really, because I know that the pandemic has had a double whammy on dental health and oral health, because dentists closed. And so, and particularly for care leavers and children in care, they couldn't access dentists because of the routine, because of the pandemic. So I think it would be interesting to know, if it was already poor, how bad is it now because of the impact of the pandemic, and what's the recovery programme to get that back on track, and in particularly our looked after children, you know, who we're corporate parents for, you know, it's for all children, but obviously, so that, you know, that might just be something to tease out on that one, Councillor Gandy.
Absolutely. Then January we've got the budget, and that will be a single meeting. And then March of 2022, again, we may we may look at what we're going to be doing with that one, and we also obviously at that one consider the work programme for 2022-2023. Business to allocate at the moment is a task and finish group for NEET, so we need to look at that. But I think we should be looking at that after we've dealt with the task and finish group that we are looking at the scoping document for today, because I don't think we've got the administrative resources to run more than 2 TNFs at any one time. And then if we can add to the briefing notes, Matt, something about the Kickstart.
Yes,
and if
I'll add
we
that in.
are able to bring that to the July meeting, that would be good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
We're
I'll
really
stop
happy with
the
it.
share now then.
Yeah.
Councillor Gandy, sorry, I've been trying to raise my hand but couldn't find it while the screen was finished.
Sorry.
I just wondered, regarding the deep dive on looked after children, which I know is going right back to the beginning, would it be helpful to also have information about the type of placement that children are in, i.e. is it an in-house fostering, external agency?
Yeah, we said that, Richard.
Yeah.
We
Right,
said that.
and then the distance from home.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, please. Yes. And obviously, if they're in residential care, it would be useful to know if they're in residential care because that is the best place for them to be, or if they're in residential care because we do not have an appropriate foster carer for them to be with. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Right. Is everybody happy with that? Do we have to vote on that, Matt? Or is it just...
Well,
Can I
I think
just
what...
ask one, because Richard
go on,
raised, sorry, very, very quickly, sorry. Richard raised a really good point, I think, on distance from home. And but there's another question, isn't there, about our sufficiency, our ability to longer term meet the needs of children and young people. So Richard leads work on looking at our capacity going forward and making some predictions on that. So and that's about how we are able to meet future demand, basically, or not. So that links to the key issue around perhaps on occasions over reliance on residential.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say, I asked at the performance management, performance challenge, but I don't think anybody could actually answer the question at the time. We were given a figure of the number of foster carers. I think it was 116, I think. But I asked the question whether that was more or less than it was before the pandemic, because in the Children's Directorate budget savings, there is a saving of £200,000 as a result of removal of children from residential care and the achievement of well, not an extra, but including replacements, 30 foster carers per year for the next 3 years. Now, as a scrutiny committee, we felt that was a target that wasn't likely to be reached and therefore should not have been included in the savings. I hope we are wrong, but at the meeting of the performance challenge, nobody could actually tell me whether the figure of foster carers had gone up or gone down or stayed the same. So I think that would be something that we would perhaps just need. I think we just need a trend to see a graph to see whether they've gone up or gone down. Because if we're not going to make the budget, that's £200,000 that we've got to try and find saving somewhere else. And I'm not in the bit, for me, I can't see the point in offering up a saving of £200,000 for increased more foster carers if you know you're not actually going to achieve it. It's a bit, yes, Kath.
Just to come in on this one, because it's something I picked up pretty quickly since starting around the sufficiency strategy. And it goes back to my point around what do we understand about the children in our care and their needs, and what is their pathway plan out of care? And it's around that options, and some children may remain in care. So we're sort of working with Paul Smith now, who's looking at that on a wider, and there will be a paper that comes that will be our new sufficiency strategy. It will have everything in there around our foster care recruitment and how we're going to do that, and also around how we are going to make the savings in whatever, what is our plan to make the children care. It may not necessarily move children out of residential care, because it may be in the best interest of those children to remain there because they've been settled. So it's about that balancing thing. But there will be a sufficiency strategy and a strategy around our foster cares, because it's something Hillary's working on. So it's on the action plan. So we will, I think maybe that needs to go in your programme somewhere, and we can try and get it in as an additional for you, Chair.
Thank you. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Something I want to pick on, I'm really keen on knowing more about how the early years intervention programme is working. I think I remember asking a question of Liz Edgar probably 6 months ago now in the challenge performance, and we were assured that we were spending more money on that. And we know that money spent on early years intervention reduces money spent later.
Yeah.
budgets being squeezed all the time on services.
Yeah.
I'm really keen to see that we really make the best use of early years intervention. And I think at some point, whether it's in our work programme or in the Challenge Performance Review, we have a regular update on what's been done, how that's working, what more we could do, because that really will have an impact on budgets in later years. So we should capture that there somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you, Philip, absolutely. I mean, that's really one of the reasons I want to know whether the rate of young people coming into care, because that will be an indication of whether our early help work is working. But I think, Matt, can we put that at the moment with the business to advocate, and then we look at that?
Early years intervention and investment.
Yes.
Fine.
Prevention, Matt. Early intervention and prevention. And it's Kerry, it's Nicola Turvey who probably lead on that. Kerry, would that be right? Has he dropped off?
You're mute.
You're on mute, Kerry.
Sorry, everyone. Apologies again. I should have pressed the space bar. Sorry. Yes, is the answer, Chris. Yeah. It'd be Nikki Turvey. That's right. Yeah, it would. Yeah, thanks. Whilst I'm on, folks, whilst I've got my mute off, I've just been swapping emails with Alex Heath, who leads on Kickstart. Yes, she's happy to bring an update on Kickstart programme for the July meeting, folks. So that's a quick win, I think.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kerry.
folks.
Very
Thanks.
helpful. Thank you. Right, Matt, do we need to vote on this?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll display the recommendations. If I can have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation to approve the work programme, subject to the discussions that have taken place today, and then Jen will put a poll up on screen to vote on.
I'll propose it. Do I have a seconder? Graham to second.
Thank you.
We move all of those who are out of the. Okay, so and the additional. Yeah, it's fine. That's okay. Okay. Could we move the people who are non-voting members out?
Yes, Chair, that's been done. We've got 6 voting members and the poll should be on your screen. All votes are in, Chair, and that's been approved unanimously.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
And then I believe we just have another poll separately.
We'll need a discussion on the scoping document, and then we'll launch that poll when we've come to the end of that discussion.
Can I bring all members back on that occasion, Matt?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
I just wanted to say, Jenna looks very impressive. It looks like she's got a crown on her head. You look very queenly, Jenny.
She is a queen.
We couldn't argue with that, could we? It's the church in the background. It's just so positioned. It looks like you've got a.
Right, thank you. We move on to the next part of this item, which is to approve a draft scoping document for the paediatric therapist task and finish group, which is attached with your papers. I just wonder if there's any comments. Before I open it up to the meeting, I would like to add, under the terms of reference, to understand the impact of the impact on therapies, paediatric therapies, following the merger of the Hereford CCG with the Worcestershire CCG. And the reason that I've asked for that is because I attended a meeting, an adults meeting, where we were talking about various issues to do with mental health, but in particular, we were talking about anorexia. And it was, there wasn't an issue so much with urgent cases of anorexia. They were both in Herefordshire and Worcestershire dealt with it within 7 days, and that had been the status before the merger. But with the less urgent, I can't remember exactly the number of weeks for Herefordshire, but it was something like 7, and Worcestershire was 14. So the target now for Herefordshire and Worcestershire is 14. Now, for me, and I made the point at the meeting, to round down to a lower figure does not seem to me to be of benefit to the residents of Herefordshire. And so I think it's really important that we do include the impact of the merger on paediatric therapies, and we in particular look at whether they have rounded down the waiting times for these therapies, either for Worcestershire people or Herefordshire people, because in some cases it could be the other way around. Does anybody else wish to speak on about the scoping document that's been provided? Diana.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you about the CCG merger. Sorry.
No, that's right. You've got it right.
So you can. Yeah, so we're coming up to 2 hours, and yeah, just on the terms of reference of the Task and Finish group. This is probably me being pedantic, but bullet point 4 about receiving an assessment of the impact of health needs, and also the related key questions, which are further down in the table. I know we have to be evidence-based, but sometimes there's a lot of quite general or generic information, which is either very general or generic, or creates a lot of work on local situation for officers. And, you know, I'm very happy to take it as read that these therapies are beneficial and that we ought to be supporting them. And I don't want to create a lot of work for somebody to give us a lot of background information to let us know that.
Mm. Okay, Matt.
Okay, if you want me to remove that particular bullet point, yes, that's fine.
That's my suggestion. I don't know what other people feel.
I'm fine by that.
Yeah, I've got one into the reason for the review. I don't like things when it's a bit woolly, when it says list services and will include. They just list all the services that are included. So
where are we looking?
In the very first bit, Carol. So
let's
go back up to it.
Including. Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So we're at right at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Where it says including list how the coronavirus impact on the provision of pediatric therapies, including. So what ones that aren't being listed? I think we should just list all of them, because then when it comes down to exactly what's been included, it's extremely well detailed of what has been included and what wasn't. So only from my history of these type of things where people come and say, well, when you didn't include this, well, no, it wasn't in the scope. And you just decide exactly what the scope is at the beginning.
Do we have to have a list, or do we have to have the word including? Because
no, we don't have to have the word including. I think that would
probably don't know how many therapies there are until they start to do the TNF. Okay. And then we might still miss one out. So if we just put to consider how the coronavirus has impacted on the provision of paediatric therapies, and then the TNF will be guided with their own experience and knowledge and people that they'll involve in this with regards to the therapies that there are, because I suspect, Matt, that you don't know how many there are.
No, I'm certainly not an expert in this. I have consulted with someone in the CCG, and this is the range of services that she advised to focus on. But I take Councillor Andrews' point.
Even if it's just in a term of reference for the group to say these are the ones they've included in that reference.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make that change. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Mark.
So everybody's happy with that? Are they? Otherwise, now, do we have anybody that's prepared to volunteer to chair this Task and Finish? Kath?
Yeah, I'm happy to put myself forward. Subject, obviously, maybe getting a bit of input training on the. I'd perhaps like to do some visits, or to if that's COVID
Should be all right. Yeah,
it's a, you know,
that's good.
Understanding of the
yeah. Thank you, Kath. I know Councillor Mike Jones has expressed an interest in being involved in this, hasn't he, Matt?
Yes, we've had an expression of interest from Mike Jones. It would also be just useful to confirm the number to sit on the actual.
5, if we can.
5 would seem a sensible number. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anybody else within the scrutiny committee who would like to be included? Diana? Yes, that's 3 then. Anybody else? We've got 3. So what we'll do, Matt, can we go out to group leaders, please?
Yes, that's fine. Yep.
And see if we've got other people that might be, I'm sure we have.
Should we also ask Councillor Paul Andrews as well? Because obviously he's
not... Oh, yes, sorry, yes, and yeah. Paul, yeah. Okay. Do we have to vote on this, Matt?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Right, Jen. I propose it.
I'll second.
Philip seconded it.
Okay, could you just bear with me a second,
Absolutely.
please? Sorry. Okay, so that's the recommendation, and I've included the membership and the chair.
Okay. That's fine.
Unanimously approved once again, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. If those that were in the waiting room can come back, please. Okay, we now move on then to the resolutions requiring responsive action, the tracker regarding recommendations that we've put forward in the past and where we have got with them. If I start with the 28th of July 2020, the schools update. Kerry, I know part of this is scheduled for September.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could give us an update on where we are with the rest of it, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A quick update, folks. If you look at the date, 28th of July, there were lots of pandemic-related concerns at that time, which we kind of gave regular updates on. So looking down those bullet points there, further survey about children's mental health. We are doing that for the September meeting, and we've done one already on public health, have done one, so that's underway. The issue about private nurseries that have opened and closed was because at the time we were worried that a lot of the private nurseries were shutting because of the pandemic. I'm pleased to say they have actually updated that, and so that they're all bar one have reopened. So we're back up to a full complement of about 180, which is good. The national catch-up programme is in the schedule. That keeps changing around us a little bit, if I'm honest. So we're briefing folk internally on what's available on the national catch-up programme, and I'm happy to bring that to the next scrutiny panel. Mental health we talked about, I think, didn't we, just earlier? The mental health services were impacted. I think that will be part of that. And finally, the attendance rates. We do that daily actually now, but we were worried at that time about whether schools would reopen properly in the September reopening. That we now know they did. We now know actually that attendance in Herefordshire was well above national average very quickly, and for most of the autumn term was amongst the highest in the West Midlands region, if not the highest. So that feels like a mixture of historic concerns of the time and the mental health issue which we're bringing to the September meeting now, Chair, if that's okay.
I think the issue was, I think at that time, because it was July 2020, we were coming out of lockdown. Everybody was beginning to think that we were going back to whatever normal was. And of course, that continued right the way through to September, October, and then we went back into lockdown again. And so really, I think we preempted. we were too optimistic, I think, that this was going to be all done and dusted and we were going to have a historic review. And that wasn't the case.
And it got, and it got put back again in January, didn't it? Didn't it, Jay? Again, indeed.
It did. Which is why then on the 23rd of March at our Children and Young People Scrutiny meeting, we asked for the mental health thing again. And I also know, which will come out probably in the therapies thing, that there's been a massive issue, not necessarily in Herefordshire, but countrywide, regarding speech and language because of lockdown, and the fact that young children haven't had interaction with other young children or other people, and that has caused and we know that in Herefordshire that's quite a big issue anyway. So that's quite a worrying thing. Or I think it is.
Yeah, I agree, Chair. And some of those bullet points there in that first issue back in July last year were a reflection of the worries everybody had at that time in the run up to the September reopening. As it happens, events just carried on around us, didn't they, until about now, really.
Let's hope we don't have to put this back on the agenda.
Yes, indeed. Thanks.
So we'll wait. We'll come forward with your your item in September, and then obviously we've got the item in July. So that's fine.
Can I just quickly then on that just quickly ask about an update on the emotional literacy support assistance in schools and the safe spaces ideas that obviously were suggested as ways in which young people can express how they're feeling, and obviously preempting any more serious issues down the road. So is there any progress on that being rolled out in
so on in March? I haven't got to that one yet.
Oh, sorry, I'm being
that's
called wishful thinking, I think, isn't it?
I'll be there shortly. So the next one we're looking at is the 9th of January's meeting, which was the provision of children's centre services in Bromyard. Richard, if you could give us an update as to where we are on that, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Councillor Gandy. So you should be familiar with Councillor Norman took the decision at the end of February to extend the current service for 12 months. Around about the same time, the Early Years Partnership has been looking at the annual targets for all of our children's centre services. So we've been able to incorporate that into the contract extension, and we've been working with the provider to finalise the details of that extension, and I believe the documents are with the provider at the moment for signing. Looking forward, so that decision gives us until spring 2022, but I'm very aware that we will need to make another decision in advance of that. So we're trying to progress the work so that a future decision can come forward sometime between October and December. That would allow some time for then any implementation of any decision that might follow. One of the recommendations was around consultation. So now that we've got the contractual stuff pretty much signed, sealed and delivered, the work can begin on scoping the purpose of that consultation in a bit more detail. I'm really keen that we make sure that that's as meaningful as possible and can inform further service development. So you mentioned children's services earlier, so it would be useful to look at use that as an opportunity to look at children's centre provision a bit more widely than just Bromyard. So I'll be working with colleagues on scoping that consultation. One of the other recommendations regarding alternative options. Obviously, when we put forward the future decision, that will be based on an options appraisal, and we will be able to include that in the recommendations in the report. We are looking at how children's centres are delivered in other areas, see what experience we can have. There are different ways of providing that service. There was a recommendation regarding staffing arrangements, and we did just want to make it clear that obviously if when any contract ends, it's then the employer's responsibility to consult with their staff under the chief regulations. Obviously, we would work with the provider if that was to be the decision, but I just it's not a role that the council has a direct involvement.
No, I think at the time the issue was, if I remember rightly, is that the report talked about TUPEing the staff over, and the Hope Centre was saying that would be difficult because those staff were partially employed by the work that they were doing on behalf of Herefordshire Council, but they were also employed by the Hope Centre. So it wasn't as simple as it appeared in the report. And there was a view, which is only anecdotal, that some of those staff had been employed previously by Herefordshire Council full time, and probably wouldn't want to go back to being employed by Herefordshire Council full time. But that's only anecdotal.
Yeah. So as I say, obviously I don't want to preempt any future recommendations or decisions, but the situation is if a contract was to be either brought in-house or awarded to a different provider, we would work with that incumbent provider to make sure that staff are involved as appropriate.
Yeah. And I think for us, one of the main issues that you raised at the meeting at the time was the concerns about the early help referrals coming from the Hope Centre or not coming from the Hope Centre. So I think what we wanted to see when you do your consultation with the key stakeholders in Bromyard is, are the early help referrals coming from other sources, in which case you would be absolutely right that the Hope is not picking up the work that they perhaps ought to be, or is it a case that actually there isn't the early help referrals required within that area because other organisations are providing that support? I think that was our main gist of what we were on about. So we would want to see you talking probably to health centres, to third sector organisations, those sort of schools, those sort of people who are, who would, if there is an issue with Hope not doing what we want them to do, they would probably be the people that would be aware of that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think, as I said, it would be useful to look at. You mentioned early help referrals, where they come from across the county, and how does Bromyard compare as well. I do have to be careful and mindful though, so we talk to those stakeholders. Obviously, this could be in future a commercial decision.
Yes.
So I have to make it about the service more than the provider.
But I also think you've got to be careful thinking about it. I think you've got to be careful about comparing the early help referrals from Bromyard and making a sort of direct comparison with other areas, because certainly knowing from when I was in Redditch, there would have been areas of Redditch where there would have been a lot of early help referrals, the nature of the neighbourhood, and there would have been other areas of Redditch which would not have had many referrals.
I've had that debate with colleagues, and I'm keen that we do it on a level playing field, so on a per head of population basis, so that it can be a direct comparison.
Yes, that's fair. Okay. And will Scrutiny have a chance to look at your proposals going forward?
If it wishes to, I've shared a schedule of our commissioning work programme with Matt.
Right. Okay.
So there's a whole list of things on there, and I'm sure.
I think we would like to. I think we would like to.
So we'll firm up the timescale towards the autumn. And as I say, so the last recommendation there was about bringing things to scrutiny, which we welcome the opportunity to do.
Yeah.
I have, as I say, shared a list of activities that we've got underway this year. Some of them are fairly small and routine, so you may not be interested in those. No. Others will be more big ticket items that you might like to take interest in.
Okay, that's fine. Is everybody? Oh, Kath.
Yes, just the point on the, when you were saying about early help assessments and the like was right. But also, this again goes back to the data. If you do your hotspot areas, when you're doing that, has any of the children that have come into the system that are in child in need, child protection, missed the other help, come into statutory, looked after, come from that area? And then they've jumped, they've missed they've not been in early help. So you capture it all is what I would say.
Yeah, that would be great, and it'd be great if we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else had their hand up, didn't they? Okay. Diana, was it you? No. Does anybody else want to comment on that particular item? Do we want it to come back to scrutiny? Yes. Anybody else? Anybody? Or Philip does. Anybody else? Yes, Diana? Yeah. Okay, we'll bring it back to scrutiny. So if we can, Matt, if you can liaise with Richard, because by then we probably would have done the work on the TNF. Yeah. And we can feed some of that into, well, we'll be using,
be helpful too.
We'll be using Richard as well during that TNF, I would think.
Okay, yeah, I can make a note for that.
Yeah, because I mean, his expertise is really important in that particular TNF. Okay, right. We move on then to the, right, Kath, hey, 23rd of March, Children and Young People Mental Health, increased number of support assistants trained in emotional literacy in local schools.
Yeah, I've already said my
yeah, Kerry.
But yeah, just if we could have an update, I think it's really you know, good that we're cracking on with this, because as I say, I think these things have been proved to be really helpful. We've heard young people say themselves through the Health Watch videos, you know, that you know, to have somewhere in school they can go where they feel completely relaxed and able to talk about their feelings. It's, you know, it really is such a useful tool in catching things early and preventing CAMS being overwhelmed down the track. So yeah, just a little update would be great.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. A quick update is this. Just going down those in order, folks. The update report on 14th of September, we've talked about already, that's coming. And yes, we'll send it to members of the committee once completed. On the last two there, Kath, the investigate, it's an increase in the number of support assistants. We've tried that twice now. This is quite recent, really. We've tried it twice, but reality's blocked us both times. And by that, I mean schools are nowhere near normal at the moment. And what they're doing, they're still working in COVID mode. They've still got bubbles, which means staffing is stretched. And when we asked about that third point about training support assistants in emotional literacy, we kind of got a not yet please response from most of the primary schools. And that was because they're using their support assistants to manage bubbles across the staff. That wasn't to say they were dismissing it. They were asking for a bit of time before they released support assistants for this training. So that's the prime, but they were also reporting that actually they were delighted with how resilient the children were. This is the primary school phase, really, having come back from lockdown. In the secondaries, it was a bit different. They are doing this in the secondaries. We publicised this, and indeed the Safe Spaces one with the Health Watch admin through a spotlight a little while ago. The secondaries were kind of further ahead in it, but they didn't really get going until about the 23rd of March. If you remember the first 2 or 3 weeks in March, they were still in the mode of testing students twice a week and so on. So if you visit a school now, it's tempting to think they're back fully open, which they are, but it's also tempting to think they're operating as they would normally, and they're not. I've visited quite a few schools in the last 2 or 3 weeks. They're still very much in COVID mode, and indeed we had a positive outbreak in a nursery close even yesterday. So we haven't had much take up, I'm afraid to say, on that, and that's come from the schools who are saying we do want to do the emotional literacy support plan, but we don't want to do it yet, was the response from the primary phase. So we've paused on that. We keep reminding folks about the availability of this through the Spotlight review, but I think it probably is timely to have another look at that now. It's almost as if schools have been back in, they're nothing like normal mode, but they're moving to a more business as usual mode now. But it's only very, very recently that they've done that. And I think they just felt that the request that we made, can you release support assistance for training, was a little bit premature this term. But we can have another look at that, Kath, I would suggest now. there wasn't much take up, would be my view. I'm just wondering, as I'm speaking both, whether those two bottom items there about the emotional literacy in local schools and the safe spaces could be picked up in the survey report on early September, because we will have done some stuff around that now and probably had a better take up from schools, to be blunt about it.
Okay.
Maybe we'd have a fresh look at that and put it into the September update.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of that. I really do, because I know plenty of people that work in schools, and as you say, it's survival mode to a certain extent. But I think this also comes down to a resource issue, because perhaps schools need to be given extra resource to do this, to release staff to do it, because I know plenty of teaching assistants that would really welcome the chance to get further training. But obviously, as you say, if schools are tied in terms of trying to cover for bubbles, etc. at the moment, then you know, whether the temporary cover of within schools would help that issue. So just something to just bear in mind. Realise that resources is always an issue, but you know, I think it's a quite a convenient excuse to say that, you know, we're trying to do X or Y. And my worry is always that mental health issues always get pushed aside, because, you know, as you say, particularly if we're in a pandemic, and obviously that surviving that and coping with that is very important. But obviously also that having a young person myself, and they're very good at hiding their feelings as well, by the same token, and saying they're okay when you know, that they're saying they're not certainly going to tell their parents necessarily that they're okay.
No, they weren't being sorry, Councillor, they weren't being dismissive of the suggestions at all. They just were a little bit questioning of the timing of it, really. The funding
on the table, that's fine.
It is. It's very much on the table, and the safe spaces definitely. It's just that they felt the staff are too stretched at the moment for it. But we can go back to have a look at that. The funding might be an issue for release of support assistance, because technically there isn't a budget for it at the moment, but that can be quite expensive to cover release time. But we can certainly have a look at that. That might trigger a bit more enthusiasm between now and the end of this term, mightn't it? We can do that. Thanks.
And the other item is the Herefordshire Capital Investment Strategy for Special Educational Needs. Kerry, can you give an update from what happened from after our scrutiny meeting?
It's gone. It's been the S&D strategy's been recommended and supported. There was one addition there which you've captured there, that the strategy clarifies the outcomes of the sixth form consultation for Westfield School. There was no dissent around the overarching strategy. It was about the commissioning of a feasibility study to rebuild Westfield should still allow for a sixth form provision, because the consultation on the sixth form provision hadn't finished, if that makes sense. And I committed to meet with Westfield School governance and local councillors and head teacher, which I actually met yesterday. So that's back in as much as let's let the consultation run its course. We came up with some good ideas. It was a good meeting. It was very constructive, but because it only happened yesterday afternoon, I haven't had a chance to do anything with it yet with anybody else. But my suggestion is that the SEND strategy, which has been approved, runs its course, and the feasibility study, I think, which is about whether or not, or how old the age range should be for the Westfield youngsters, we have a fresh look at. This is all consultative at the moment. This isn't at the decision-making stage yet. It's still at the stage of consulting on and looking at feasibility. But there were some really positive and helpful suggestions from the folk at Westfield yesterday that came out that that I can brief you on once I've briefed my colleagues on it, Chair. If
I
that's
understand
possible.
that. And I thank you, Kerry. And obviously I thank the committee, because I think probably we might not have been in the place we are now if we hadn't have brought it to scrutiny. So I think that was good
that was helpful
that we did. I think again it pointed out the situation that sometimes things don't get offered to scrutiny and they can possibly get through the net without us having seen it at all, and it was by chance that we were aware of this was imminent.
And on that, Chair, they were very grateful for scrutiny's involvement in this earlier. When I was talking to them yesterday, they said it made a difference. They've suddenly felt listened to, frankly, a bit more than they felt before. So I think we let that. So the SEND strategy stands. It's been supported by Cabinet widely or Council widely. It's consultative at the moment, and the feasibility study needs to reflect that consultation, is really what you're asking.
Thank you.
So that's there.
Right, before I move on
I've got one more little bit, Chair. Sorry, one more sentence at the end. Apologies. Right at the end, that issue about further detail presented about children with autism.
Yes.
I'm going to suggest that Les Knight comes and presents on that. He has done good work on this in as much as he's set up some what he calls nurture hubs for children with autism. There, I think 8 from memory. He put out an expression of interest to schools. He's got all 8. They're scattered geographically. It would probably be more helpful to you if he came and presented on that item at some point in the near future.
Okay.
But there's been quite a bit of progress on that recently, I think.
Matt, can we add that to the unallocated? And
Business to allocate, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that, can't we? Yeah.
Thanks, folks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move to the recommendations on this particular item to vote on, Felicity, where are you? Oh, there you are. Felicity, would you like to comment on anything that you've heard during the course of this meeting?
Right, well, I haven't got a lot to say except to thank you for a lot of really interesting and helpful discussion. Actually covered a terrific lot of ground this afternoon. It felt very positive. I think it's been really useful, and we've kind of shaken things up a little bit in how we're going to do things, what we're going to look at, and so on. So yes, I found that really interesting to be sitting in on. Thank you all very much for that. Nothing to add, you'll be glad to hear, because I think you've got plenty on your plate at the moment. But hopefully you and I, Carol, will,
and Diana,
regular.
Yes, that would be good. That would be good.
Yeah,
I think that's important to sort of
absolutely
get them going again. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's helpful, and things come up in between meetings anyway. So, but I think the big thing we've taken on, or one of the big things, is to look at all these items and consider whether scrutiny should be having a look at them.
Yes,
in plenty of time.
Thank you. And Jane, did you find the meeting helpful? Press your space bar.
That didn't work for me, the space bar.
Okay.
I have found it very interesting and useful. A lot of food for thought, a lot of information gathered, and I appreciate it, and thank you for that.
That's good. Thank you very much. And obviously, any feedback that you want to give through to either me or to Matt, or anything that Health Watch is doing with regards to children and young people, that absolutely feed it through to us so that we can possibly put it onto the work programme or I'll get a briefing note or something.
Okay, I'll give that some thought, because I think a regular sort of update of what we're doing in this area could be helpful.
It could be. It absolutely could be. Yeah. Diana.
Yeah, thank you. Just before we end, I'll be very brief. Firstly, and it relates to what Jane was saying, I think it's a good time for us to again say that everybody is welcome and encouraged to suggest subjects for scrutiny to us as a committee, and that means everybody, professionals and members of the public. I think we've strayed a bit from the agenda of the work programme, but I think it's
we needed to.
Yes, it's been really useful to get back to basics, really, back to basics about the purpose of the committee. And personally, I've really liked the sort of feeling of co-production that our conversations have had.
Good. Anybody else want to say anything? Kath.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know whether you were going to say anything about this at the end or not, but obviously regarding remote meetings, the legislation means that obviously remote meetings are going to come to an end very shortly. So I'm guessing that our next meeting will be.
Well, the meeting that we're proposing for on the legal services on the 21st of May, Matt is looking at Plough Lane.
Well, that might not actually be possible now, Chair. So we are aware that the regulations are coming to an end. We are aware that we'll no longer be able to hold virtual meetings without further legislation from government. So we are looking with speed at what may be possible and what venues we can use. But there's obviously regulations which we'll have to abide by at those meetings in terms of social distancing. So we'll have to choose those locations which suit all of our needs. So yes, do
Side
in the next.
department, I think.
It's a very difficult one because well, not just in theory, in practice, I'm one of the sort of extremely vulnerable, I mean, heaven forbid, extremely vulnerable people. And I've got a letter which basically says that I shouldn't go into indoors with more than 30 people until September. So, you know, I will literally, from an instruction point of view, I will have to break that in order to attend meetings. So it is a bit of a strange thing. I don't doubt it will be eventually resolved and we will be able to hold some public meetings as hybrid or something like that. But I recognise that, you know, if the legislation as it stands doesn't permit it, then the High Court will not support that view. And the legislation obviously was put in place at a time when they probably thought that COVID was only going to last a few months and that was it. And they didn't realise.
Just to confirm, we are progressing with plans for physical meetings, and we will update you very shortly on it.
Thank you.
As long as they're not outdoors.
Bring blankets with you.
Yeah, and a hot water bottle. Right, we've now moved to the voting with regards to the tracker. Do we need to do that, Matt?
No, that's just for noting,
No, okay.
Chair, so that's fine.
So we're now moving on to the date. This is the date of the meeting after the 21st of May. So the next meeting will be the 1st of June 2021 at 10:15. Can I check that before I formally close the meeting, can I check with Democratic Services team that the live stream has been switched off and we are no longer broadcasting live or